Hello everyone, I am Pat Leach. I'm the Director of Lincoln City Libraries, and on behalf of Lincoln City Libraries, I welcome you to this African American Read-In. The goal of the Read-In is to make the celebration of African American literacy and literature a traditional part of Black History Month, and February is Black History Month. We're delighted to partner again with Lincoln Public Schools on presenting this event, as well as an event that was held just a couple of weeks ago. And I want to recognize the good work of Pete Ferguson in arranging for these events to happen and to happen so well. All of this is really about stories, sharing stories, remembering stories, honoring stories, and learning about each other through stories. And in doing that, we also honor the role of education, its role in teaching, its role in encouraging the people who tell the stories, and in encouraging those who will end up studying and learning from those stories. So together, we're honoring stories in many ways and demonstrating the power of sharing literature with one another. So I would like to spend a little bit of time thanking some of the people who've had a hand in organizing this. I've mentioned Pete Ferguson already. For the library, Brenda Ely and Sheila Jacobs were part of the organizers, and let's give them a quick round of applause in celebration of their good work. One of the things that I like to pay attention to as we do this kind of event is to think about 10 years forward, 20 years forward, 30 years forward. I love to think about all those kids in Lincoln Public Schools who this month are learning a lot from the stories that they're hearing. And I think a lot about how they will be the ones telling stories, and how in another 20 or 30 years there will be somebody at this podium reading from something that they have written. And I hope that as we share our stories today, we're also thinking 20 or 30 years into the future for what will be coming. So that's another way of thinking about what we do here today, setting the foundation for what will happen in the future. A practical note today: instead of each person being introduced individually, as we go forward, we will simply go in the order in which people are on the program, and you'll simply follow one on another. And I want to say again, welcome, and let's enjoy these readings and these stories from African American authors. And it's my privilege to introduce our first person up to the podium, which will be Bill Bryant. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Pat. I'd like to say that in turbulent times like these, when there is so much divisiveness throughout our nation, let us not forget that the resiliency of the human spirit has been a common theme of the vast majority of African American writers from day one. And although the African American experience in the U.S. has been the most precarious of all newcomers to this continent, the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of our families are no different than any other members of society. Nowhere is this more evident than in the volumes of literature contributed by African American writers. We hope that from these samplings of African American expression that you will find the motivation to go out and learn a bit more about the African American experience. I am sure that once you get past the cultural nuances, you will find that deep down inside, all of us share many of the same core values. At this time, I would like for us to stand and sing the Negro National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, Let us march on till victory is won. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thy who hast by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path, we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. Thank you. And now,
Good afternoon. My name's Johnny J. Pitts, police officer at the Lincoln Airport Authority. It's my pleasure to be here today and share a letter with you written by an African-American police officer in response to the Ferguson shooting in Missouri in 2014. The letter talks about the conflict that African-American police officers have, saying that we have to live in two different worlds. Everything that Officer Anwar Sanders speaks of directly relates to how most African-American police officers feel. Officer Sanders quotes at the end Mahatma Gandhi saying that you must be the change you wish to see in the world. And his letter is just simply titled A Police Officer's Open Letter to Black Protesters. It starts, Dear Black Protesters, it's hard for me to sit in silence as I watch you marching in the streets across this nation. There is a sense of pride watching members of my generation, the selfie generation, mobilize from coast to coast behind a social cause greater than our individual selves. The images of you on cable news networks are reminiscent of civil rights era, when Americans of all ages marched to change Jim Crow laws, to end segregation, and to stop voter intimidation. I wish I could march with you, but I cannot, knowing that there is a faction among you who will never accept me or appreciate what I do each day of my life. To be frank, the misperceptions and vitriol directed towards law enforcement frightens me. I'm fully aware that not all, or even most of you, think that law enforcement is out to eliminate black men. But there is a loud minority who, along with elements in the media, particularly social media, is spreading a dangerous narrative about law enforcement. This only creates a greater rift between police departments and communities of color and will ultimately result in more misunderstandings and more loss of lives. I know this not because I'm just a police officer, but because I am a proud 25-year-old African-American man. I exist in the middle of two worlds and have the conversations in my head that I wish America would have allowed. I recognize the burden of my identity in this country. When I'm in uniform, I'm a peacekeeper and a protector of people with the ability to save lives. When I take my badge off at the end of my shift, reality quickly sets in. Walking past white women on the streets who clutch their bags and being followed around in convenience stores are part of the many frequent reminders that I'm just another black man in America. Little do they know that a few hours ago, before I donned my baseball cap and sneakers, if they had called 911, it had been me to their rescue. But also imagine the strain of being black and wearing the blue, to live and patrol in communities of color where F the police is a celebrated old school anthem and where some believe you're better off dead. Imagine the anxiety of being in your own home, having to keep your gun in sight and never being fully comfortable that you are safe from those who are in the fringe and wish you harm. When they fail to understand, what they fail to understand is that I'm from the community and just 1 degree of separation from living in their world. Officer Sanders goes on to talk about his twin brother and him took different paths in life. His twin brother developed a dependency on drugs, spiraled in life into crime, and it led to his incarceration. He says this is why making an arrest is still very difficult, part of his job. Like 99% of those in law enforcement, I did not get into this profession to disrupt or end lives. Rather, I want to save the lives of so many people like my brother. Most police officers do this job because they love the community that they serve. We chose to be in a profession where every day you get to make a difference, whether it's saving a child from an unhealthy home, coming to the aid of a domestic violence victim, finding shelter for homeless people, or getting a reckless drunk driver off the road. Contrary to what many believe, we do not hope to have violent run-ins. It is actually what I dread the most. One of the most daunting experiences of my career was having an individual raise his gun at my back from a window in the dead of night. I had to make a split-second decision, one that would not only affect the life of the gunman, but my life and the lives of everyone I hold dear. I was fortunately able to gain control of the situation by getting the gunman to comply with my commands. He was eventually apprehended without a single shot being fired, and we both lived to see another day. That story didn't make the morning news, nor did I look for it to. Our job is often thankless one. The peaceful and nonviolent resolution of potentially deadly situations far outnumbers the incidents of police shootings that we've become accustomed to. It seems as if the media only views us through the lens of a camera phone. What I think is lost in the raw emotions of Ferguson is that we must be careful not to create a deeper chasm between communities of color and law enforcement. The historical skepticism that blacks have of law enforcement has merit, but we all have to work together to end institutional racism in America. The inconvenient truth is that the continued distrust is hurting us. How many crimes in our community go unsolved because we'd rather not snitch or cooperate with the police? In the coming weeks or months, the number of folks in your protests may diminish, and you must consider what the legacy of your marches, boycotts, and die-ins will be. Will our communities be better off as a result? Our parents' and grandparents' protests of the 50s and 60s worked because they weren't simply protesting against something, but for something. That movement was for changing laws and resulted in civil rights acts, voter registration acts being passed. It's not enough for you to just march against police brutality. Your movement must be for an achievable end that will make brutality less likely. While you're marching today, remember President Obama quoting of Mahatma Gandhi when he said, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." When you see a black officer today, be reminded that, like me, they risked their lives and the chance of not ever seeing their children, mothers, wives, in order to bridge the divide between law enforcement and communities of color across the country. Here are two things that we can work together to change. The Bureau of Justice statistics found that in 2007, 75% of local police forces in the United States were white. The level of our diversity in law enforcement needs to change in order for this division to end and for real change to occur. While the attention of the world is on you, demand to work with your local and state law enforcement agencies to better reflect the communities we vow to protect and serve. If you want your police departments to understand what it's like to be black in America, then the best way to ensure that is to have more black men and women recruited in their ranks. Secondly, our country is being presented with a great moment in history to heal old divisions, but it will require honest discussion. Both sides need to do away with stereotypes that prohibit us from seeing each other's humanity. While protesting has its place and is necessary to express collective frustration, it's not conducive for intelligent exchanges. What law enforcement and individuals in our communities need is to become better at engaging each other at local and personal levels. Challenge yourself to have a human discussion with the cop patrolling your neighborhood just as you would with the local shopkeepers. It's time we all become a little more human in each other's eyes. And that's it.
Good afternoon. My name is Renee Massey, and I am a public health educator with the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department. And it really is a pleasure to be here today to share with you one of the many powerful and inspiring poems of Maya Angelou. And this poem is titled, Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I rise. Do you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts of my ancestors that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise. I rise. I rise. And I just wanted to say today that from personal experience, rising from a fall is never easy. It's never easy. But I believe these words of inspiration and encouragement will always give hope to the individual who reads them and to the individual who hears them. Never forget that you can rise.
How everybody doing today? That's good. My name is Michael Hunter. I am the District Transition Specialist at LPS. I was kind of torn over what I was going to read, but seeing the nature of the kids that I deal with and the population that we all would face or whatnot with our own individuals, meaning our own youth, our own kids, I chose to pick a letter that was written to me from an incarcerated individual that I used to work with on a daily. He wrote into my nonprofit organization, and he wrote it for our kids. He wrote it for our youth. And it goes, attention young kids, young adults. My name is Jake Johansson. I am currently incarcerated at Lincoln Correctional Center, which we like to call LCC. I'm serving 59 years to 10 months to life for 4 separate felony charges. I've been down almost 3 years to the date of September 1st, 2012. I'd like to tell you all how I ended up here. I am 28 years old, soon to be 29 in October. I was addicted to dealing for 12 years. I started drinking, smoking cigarettes, and pot, AKA marijuana, at the age of 13 in 1996. That was my first mistake. I started selling pot, which I like to call marijuana. Soon after I started in 96, I pretty much then lost my life. I started small with pot and graduated and gradually became bigger. The pot marijuana ran into meth, then cocaine. I bought my first 8-ball when I was only 13 in 1996. At 14 years old in 1997, meth was calling. Then it was crank. And it was dirt cheap. I flipped my first 8-ball for a $100 profit. It was around that time that I pulled my first string of arm. That was my second mistake. I can honestly say that drugs were addicting, but what I think more addicting was life. It was not only the addicted to drugs, but it was also money and the power. I still can't comprehend how much power I had, but there's no amount of money you can put on life in that case, one of my best friends' life. So all of you reading or listening, please pay attention. I quit high school in 1999 at the age of 16. That was my third mistake. I had little to no discipline in my life. If you are a young individual in the game, and I can say, get out. Get out while you can. I got out once, and that was my fourth mistake. I didn't stay out. I went to treatment in 2005 for meth cocaine. I was clean for a short time. 3 years later, in 2008, I ended up murdering my closest friend. There's not a day go by which I don't think about my crime. I killed my best friend over $7,500 worth of drug money. That was my last mistake, which not only took his life, but his family's life, the lives of his family's life, my family's life, and all of our friends' lives. I have to live here in this life forever. I'm truly sorry for what I did, but I will never again be enough. It will never again be enough for my life in 1997 to 1998 was worthless. Some of us, it is a blur. All money, clothes, cars, stereos, everything. Everything I ever had is gone. Over what? Nothing. Nothing at all. So please think about what you are doing. Listen to your parents and your friend, not your friends. Not the party or drugs-related friends, but your real friends. The ones that care about you, telling you to stop doing the things that you're doing. It's not a game. Wherever you think you are just having fun, or the things that you can stop, you can ask yourself, have you ever asked yourself just one more time? Have you ever said that? Just one more, just once. Quit. I will never see my parents again before they pass away. That's not something I want on your shoulders. That's not something that you want on your shoulders. Someone else, blood on your hands, is something else you don't want on your shoulders. No matter what happens to me, I will always be a murderer and a dope dealer to those people who don't understand. I have dreams. I have dreams at night about my crime. It gives me bad anxiety on a daily basis. I ask myself, will it ever get better? I should have never got here in the first place. I have a great work ethic. I have unknown knowledge of many different trades. I should be an asset to the world, but instead I'm behind the walls with very little chance of getting out and being someone. So if you have a dream, a skill, follow them. Make something of yourself. Don't let people discourage you You make you. Don't worry about anything else, because you're someone with knowledge and skills regardless of what it is they say. I pray I get a chance at life again. I want people to see the real me, not the addict with no control behind me. Settle out of court. I settled out of court for $1 million settlement to my victim's family because I feel bad about what happened. And if I can pay them, if I can pay my victim's family and anyone else, I will do what I can. I pray that some of my friends, family, forgive me for what I have done. You learn quick in prison that you have no friends and family that will stick with you. I came out a family out of 4 out of 5 of us was incarcerated, more than 7 years. But I have the biggest sentence. Everyone has done time. Everyone has done time and is out doing well. But even my brothers and sisters did federal time, act like they don't even know me. I think about this when you're out there doing the things that you're doing. It's not easy for us to be forgotten in prison, but it happens. I hope and pray that this story will open your eyes and remember anything can happen, whether if you're planted or it is an accident. The penalties are all the same. Some of the worst crimes happen in the heat of the moment. Don't let yourself get into the heat of the moment. Stay positive, stay active, find a good wife, a good husband. Do good in your community, not harm it. Believe in Jesus. Believe in Jesus. Has forgiven me and all of my sins and will bless me no more than I shall be blessed. But I'm still living, trying to forgive myself for what I did. I know the Bible, and I'm trying to live for the Lord. You need to find a higher power to live. Still to this day, I wish I could go back and change my life. You have a choice now. You have a choice now. Use it. I can't go anywhere other than a penitentiary. And I can't go to any other penitentiary because of my so-called snitches got keepsavers on me, which would be a surprise who you think your friends are, and they will stab you in the back. I have closer friends in prison than I had on the street. So kids, be obedient to your elders and your authorities. Do something with your life. Simply stay out of prison. Please. This is hell. Us lifers try to make a better place, but at the end of the day, we're just inmates in khakis and have no power whatsoever. So please take these words to heart and to your mind. And in closing, and to RT Real Talk Journal, thank you for the opportunity for sharing this. Please read my letter and let me know if there's any other changes that I need to make. Not within this letter, but within my life. I will continue to write periodically, and let me know your insights. Sincerely, Jake Johansson. I read that just for the simple fact of we live in a world today, like the officer just read, we live in a world today where our youth are lost. We have to do something, and I hope that these letters and these words can save the youth of the society that we live in today. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Martha Ellen Florence, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Nebraska Educational Television, which is your statewide PBS station, and I'm a very proud member of the Lincoln Lancaster Library Board. I decided to read a story actually, from an author by the name of Virginia Hamilton. I guess it was Saturday, we celebrated 15 years of her death. And so she has been a long time person that we have followed. I came from a family of storytellers. So this particular story I'm going to read is one of the favorites of our family. It's called The People Could Fly. They say the people could fly, They say that long ago in Africa, some of the people knew magic, and they would walk up on the air like climbing up on a gate, and they flew like blackbirds over the fields, black, shiny wings flapping against the blue up there. Then many of the people were captured for slavery. The ones that could fly shed their wings. They couldn't take their wings across the water on the slave ships, too crowded, you know. The folks were full of misery. They got sick with the up and down of the sea. So if they forgot about flying, and they could no longer breathe the sweet scent of Africa. Say the people could fly, kept their power. Although they shed their wings, they kept their secret magic in the land of slavery. They looked the same as the other people from Africa who had come over, who had dark skin. Say you couldn't tell anymore who could fly and who couldn't. One such man was called Toby, and standing tall, yet afraid, was a young woman who once had wings called Sarah. Now Sarah carried a babe tied to her back. She trembled so hard, and she worked so hard, and she was scorned. The slaves labored in the fields from sun up to sundown. The owner of the slave, we'll call him their master. Say he was hard as a lump of clay, hard as a glinty coal, hard as rock pile, and he wouldn't move. His overseer on horseback pointed out the slaves who were slowing down. So we'll call him Driver. Driver cracked his whip over the slow ones to make them move faster. That whip was a sliced open cut of pain, so they moved faster because they had to. Sarah hoed and chopped and rode with the babe on her back as he slept. Say the child grew hungry. That babe started bawling so loud, Sarah couldn't stop to feed it. It couldn't stop to soothe it. She let it cry. She didn't want to. She had no heart to croon it. "Keep that thing quiet," said the overseer. He pointed his finger at the babe. The woman scrunched down lower. The driver cracked his whip across the babe anyhow. The babe hollered like any hurt child, and the woman fell to the ground. The old man, Toby, came and helped her to her feet. And here's the picture. "I must go soon," she told him. "Soon," he said. Sarah couldn't stand up straight any longer. She was too weak. The sun burned her face. The babe cried and cried. "Pity, oh pity me," it sounded like. Sarah was so sad and starving, she sat down in a row. "Get up, you black cow," said the overseer. He pointed his hand, and the driver's whip snarled around Sarah's legs. Her sack dress tore in rags. Her legs bled on the earth, and she couldn't get up. Toby was there where there was no one else to help her and the babe. "Now, before it's too late," Sarah panted. "Now, Father." "Yes, daughter, the time has come," Toby answered. "Go as you know how to go." He raised his arms, holding them out to her, "Kumyale Babatumbi," and more magic words said so closely and sounded like whispers and sighs. The young woman lifted one foot on the air, then the other. She flew clumsily at first, with the child held tightly in her arms. Then she felt the magic, the African mystery. Say she rose just as free as a bird, as light as a feather. The overseer rode after her, hollering. Sarah flew over the fields. She flew over the fences. She flew over the woods. Tall trees couldn't stay her, nor could the overseer. She flew like an eagle now until she was gone from sight. No one dared speak about it, couldn't believe it, but it was because they had seen it. Say the next day was hot in the fields. A young man slave fell from the heat. The driver came and whipped him. Toby came over and spoke the words to the fallen one. The words of ancient Africa, once heard, are never remembered completely. The young man forgot them as soon as he heard them. They went inside him, way down inside him. He got up, rolled over the air, he rode it a while, and he flew away. Another and another fell from the heat. Toby was there. He cried out to the fallen and reached his arms out to them. "Kum yala yala kum tambe." Whispers and sighs, and they too rose on the air. They rode in the hot breezes. The one flying were black and shiny sticks, wheeling over the head of the overseers. They crossed the rows, the fields, the fences, the streams, and were away. "Seize the old man," cried the overseer. "I heard him say those magic words. You seize him." One calling himself the master come running. Driver got his whip ready to curl around old Toby and tie him up. The slave owner took his hip gun from his place. He meant to kill old black Toby. But Toby just laughed. Say he threw back his head. "You don't know who I am." Don't you know, some of us in this field, he said to the faces, we's the one that can fly. And he sighed the ancient words that were a dark promise. He said, them to all of them who could fly, Baba Yambe, Baba Tumbe. There was a great outcry. The bent backs straightened up. Old men were straight. Old and young who were slaves and could fly joined hands, say like a ring song. But they didn't shuffle in a circle. No, they didn't sing. They rose on the air. They flew in a flock that was black as against the heavenly blue. Black crows or black shadows, it don't matter. They was so high. Way above the plantation, way over the slavery, say they flew away to freedom. And the old man, old Toby, flew behind them, taking care of them. He wasn't crying. He wasn't laughing. He was the seer. His gaze fell on plantation where the slaves who could not fly waited. Take us with you. Their looks spoke, but they were afraid to shout out. Toby couldn't take them. He hadn't the time to teach them to fly. They must have to wait their chance to run away. Goodbye, said the old man. Toby spoke to them, poor souls. He had to go and fly away. So they say, the overseer told it, that the one called master said it was a lie, a trick of the light. The driver kept his mouth shut. The slaves who could not fly told the people who could fly. The slaves who could not fly told the people who could fly to their children. When they were free, they told them to their children's children. When they sat close to the fire in the free land, they told it. They did so love the firelight and the freedom in telling. They say that to the children of the ones who could not fly, told their children. They told their children, they told their children, and now I'm telling you. Thank you.
How you doing? I'm Dr. Jamie Williams. I'm a athletic administrator, academic administrator, and an executive coach. And I picked a classic from the 40s by Ralph Ellison called Invisible Man. And it takes place during the 40s and 50s when there was a great migration of Southerners from the South to the North. So this main character comes from the Dixie South and goes into Harlem prior to the Renaissance. I am an invisible man. No, I am not a spook like those who hunted Edgar Allan Poe, nor am I one of your Hollywood movie ectoplasms. I am a man of substance, of flesh, of bone, of fiber, and liquids. And I might even be said to possess a mind. I am invisible. And I am invisible. Understand, simply because people refuse to see me, like the bodiless heads you see sometimes in circus sideshows, it is as though I have been surrounded by mirrors of hard, distorting glass. When they approach me, they see only my surroundings, themselves or figments of their imagination. Indeed, everything and anything except me. Nor is my invisibility exactly a matter of biochemical accident to my epidermis. That invisibility to which I refer occurs because of a particular disposition of the eyes of those with whom I come in contact. As a matter of construction of their inner eyes, those eyes with which they look through their physical eyes upon reality. I am not complaining, nor am I protesting either. It is sometimes advantageous to be unseen, although it is most often rather wearing on the nerves. Then too, you're constantly being bumped against by those of poor vision. Or again, you often doubt if you really exist. You wonder whether you aren't simply a phantom in other people's minds, say a figure in a nightmare, which the sleeper tries all of his strength to destroy. It's when you feel like this that out of resentment, you begin to bump back on people. And let me confess, you feel that way most of the time. You ache with the need to convince yourself that you do exist in the real world, that you're part of all the sound and anguish, and you strike out with your fists. You curse and you swear to make them recognize you. And alas, it's seldom successful. One night, I accidentally bumped into a man. And perhaps because of the near darkness, he saw me and called me an insulting name. I sprang at him, seized his coat lapels, and demanded that he apologize. He was a tall, blond man, and as my face came close to his, he looked insolently out of his blue eyes and cursed me. His breath hot in my face as he struggled. I pulled his chin down sharp upon the crown of my head, butting him, as I had seen the West Indians do. And I felt his flesh tear and the blood gush out, and I yelled, "Apologize, apologize." But he continued to curse and struggle. And I butted him again and again until he went down heavily on his knees, profusely bleeding. I kicked him repeatedly in a frenzy because he still uttered insults through his lips were frothy with blood. And yes, I kicked him. And in my outrage, I got out my knife and prepared to slit his throat. Right there beneath the lamp light in a deserted street, holding him in the collar with one hand and opening the knife with my teeth. When it occurred to me that the man had not seen me, actually, that he, as far as he knew, was in the midst of a walking nightmare. And I stopped the blade, slicing the air as I pushed him away, letting him fall back to the street. I stared at him hard as the lights of a car stabbed through the darkness. He lay there, moaning on the asphalt, a man almost killed by a phantom. It unnerved me. I was both disgusted and ashamed. I was like a drunken man myself, wavering about on weakened legs. Then I was amused. Something in this man's thick head had sprung out and beaten him within an inch of his life. I began to laugh at this crazy discovery. Would he have awakened at the point of death? Would death himself have freed him for wakeful living? But I didn't linger. I ran away into the dark. Laughing so hard, I felt and feared I might rupture myself. The next day, I saw his picture in the Daily News. Beneath the caption stating that he had been mugged. Poor fool. Poor blind fool. I thought with sincere compassion. Mugged by an invisible man. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dave Tivis. I'm an operations field supervisor for StarTran, which is the city's bus company. And busing has been a big part of my life, and we had some serious struggles back in the 60s as it relates to busing. And so I chose to do a rendition from LaRon Bennett Jr.'s biography of Martin Luther King, and it talks about the times of the busing and the struggles that they were going through. and how they fortified and continued to persevere. And I think it's an example that we should continually remind our young people of, that when you believe in something and you're on the side of right, you need to stick to it, and you're going to go through some challenges and some ebbs and flows there that are going to try to just take you off of that course. But you've just got to stick to it and persevere. And so I've chosen this little part here from the biography of Martin Luther King that talks about his struggle of almost giving up, or wondering if the fight was too much for them. And so I start out by, "I am here taking a stand for what I believe is right," he said. "But now I'm afraid. The people are looking to me for leadership. And if I stand before them without strength and courage, they too will falter. I am at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I've come to a point where I can't face it alone." Into King's kitchen, so it seemed to him, at any rate, there came the presence of a divine presence, and he thought he heard the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, "Stand up for righteousness, stand up for the truth, and God will be at your side forever." This vision, which bore the mark not of Gandhi, but of the Negro Baptist tradition, was, as King admitted, a turning point in his life. Having reached the end of himself and now begin to experience the beginning of himself, after that experience, King said in his autobiography, "My uncertainty disappeared. I was ready to face anything." Building on the Gandhi tradition, learning not so much from words as words fed by the blood of experience, King now transformed himself in the Montgomery movement, giving men, women, and children, and himself a new vision of struggle and a new vision of possibilities of man. King has said that the experience of Montgomery did more to clarify my thinking on the question of nonviolence than all books that I have read. He also said that the spirit of the Montgomery movement came from Jesus, the technique from Gandhi. The Montgomery struggle continued throughout the year of 1956, but it was won really at the point where King, and through him, the Negro population cast off fear, saying with their spirit and most importantly, with their bodies, that they were ready to lose everything in order to win. Not understanding the depths of the change in the Negro community, the white power structure made extraordinary blunders. On February 21, for example, the Montgomery County Grand Jury indicted some 90 of the leading boycott participants on a charge of violating the 1921 statute, which made it a misdemeanor for anyone to hinder lawful business without just cause or legal excuse. Within 48 hours, King and the other leading pastors were arrested. The mass arrest for practically all the Negro ministers of Montgomery, as almost anyone could have predicted, unified the Negro community as it had never been unified before, and the trial of King as a test case for the other indicted Montgomeryans served only to increase his statute locally and nationally. During a 4-day trial, the Negroes of Montgomery thronged the courtroom wearing clothed crosses bearing the legend, "Father, forgive them." When King was convicted on March 22nd, he and Coretta emerged from the courthouse smiling triumphantly on the courthouse steps. The young couple was hailed by the large crowd of demonstrators shouting, "Long live King. We ain't gonna ride those buses no more." All the while, on another level, the legal level, things of consequences were unfolding. Under the impact of events, the movement jettisoned its original demands and opened an attack on segregation per se. On February 1, 4 Negro women asked the federal court to ban bus segregation in Montgomery. On July the 4th, the court ruled that statute requiring bus segregation in Montgomery were illegal. The cause was immediately appealed to the United States Supreme Court. Before that tribunal could hand down a decision, Montgomery officials made a grab for victory that almost succeeded, asking a state court to enjoin the Montgomery Improvement Association from operating an illegal transit system. This move, of course, imperiled not only the carpooling, but it also the movement. On Tuesday, November 13th, King and his aides, their spirits drooping, waited forlongingly in a Montgomery court for the inevitable decision outlawing the carpool. During a lull in the proceedings, King noticed a stir at the prosecution table. At that moment, Rex Thomas, an Associated Press reporter, handed King a piece of paper on which these words were written. The United States Supreme Court today affirmed a decision of a special 3-judge U.S. District Court in declaring Alabama state and local laws requiring segregation on busing unconstitutional. And from that point, segregation on the buses was considered illegal, and it just transformed our country into a movement of the civil rights era, and as it goes on to even today. But the struggle, even though we've come a long way, is still not over. And as we know, we have a black president, but we have a lot of racial tension and a lot of racial division within our country. And it's something that we have to deal with, but we also have to deal with it with our hearts and understand how to interact with one another, because we all have to live in this country together, and we've got to figure out a way to make that happen. But we've got to have some honest dialogue and conversation about it, and we've got to accept different ideas in how that goes. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Shanna Letcher. I am an advocate for African American students in the Lincoln Public Schools District. Natasha Trethewey was born in Gulfport, Mississippi, the daughter of poet, professor, and Canadian immigrant Eric Trethewey and social worker Gwendolyn Ann Turnbull. The daughter of a mixed-race marriage, Trethewey experienced her parents' divorce when she was 6. She subsequently spent time in Atlanta, Georgia with her mother and in New Orleans, Louisiana with her father. Encouraged to read as a child, Trethewey studied English at the University of Georgia, earned an MA in English and creative writing from Hollins University, and received an MFA in poetry from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. The fort that she writes about in this poem that I'm going to share with you is dedicated to the Louisiana Native Guards, one of the first African-American combat units to fight in the Civil War. Miss Trethewey won the Pulitzer Prize in 2007 for her 2006 collection, Native Guard, which contains the poem I'll read today, Elegy for the Native Guard. We leave Gulfport at noon. Gulls overhead trailing the boat. Streamers, noisy fanfare, all the way to Ship Island. What we see first is the fort. Its roof of grass, a lee half reminder of the men who served there, a weathered monument to some of the dead. Inside, we follow the ranger, hurried though we are to get to the beach. He tells of graves lost in the Gulf, the island split in half when Hurricane Camille hit, shows us casemates, cannons, the store that sells souvenirs, tokens of history long buried. The Daughters of the Confederacy has placed a plaque here at the fort's entrance. Each Confederate soldier's name raised hard in bronze. No names carved for the Native Guards, 2nd Regiment, Union men, Black Phalanx. What is monument to their legacy? All the grave markers, all the crude headstones, water lost. Now fish darting among their bones. And we listen for what the waves intone. Only the fort remains, near 40 feet high, round, unfinished, half open to the sky. The elements, wind, rain, God's deliberate eye.
My name is Keyshawn Cunningham, and I am a 6th grade African American scholar at Goodrich Middle School. 6 months before he was assassinated, King spoke to a group of students at Barrett Junior High School in Philadelphia on October 26, 1967. The title of his speech was, "What is your life's blueprint?" I want to ask you a question, and that is, what is your life's blueprint? Whenever a building is constructed, you usually have an architect who draws a blueprint, and that serves as the pattern, as the guide, and a building is well erected without a good, solid blueprint. Now, each of you in the process of building the structure of your lives, and the question is whether you have a proper, a solid, and a sound blueprint. I want to suggest some of the things that should begin your life's blueprint. Number 1, in your life's blueprint should be a deep belief in your own dignity, your worth, and own somebodyness. Don't allow anybody to make you feel that you're nobody. Always feel that you count, always feel that you have worth, and always feel that your life has ultimate significance. And I say to you, my young friends, doors are open to you, doors of opportunities that were not open to your mothers and fathers. And the great challenge facing you is to be ready to face these doors as they open. Ralph Waldo Emerson said in a lecture in 1871, if a man can write a book better or create a better sermon or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, even if he builds his house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to his door. This hasn't always been true, but it will become increasingly true, and so I would urge you to study hard, to burn the midnight oil. I would say to you, don't drop out of school. I understand all the sociological reasons, but I urge you that in spite of your economic plight, in spite of solution that you're forced to live in and stay in school. And when you discover what you will be in life, set out to do it as if God Almighty called you at the particular moment in history to do it. Don't just set out to do a good job. Set out to do such a good job that the living, the dead of the unborn couldn't do it any better. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, be a trail. If you can't be a sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or fail. Be the best of whatever you are. Thank you.
My name is Pastor Kevin Pringle. I am the senior pastor of 180 Church here in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm going to read an excerpt from a book from one of my favorite authors, someone I have the privilege of knowing personally. His name's Kevin Pringle. And it was a book I had published in 2004. And I'm reading from the first chapter. The first chapter is called Radical Change. The book is called Radical Obedience. And the subtext to this, or subtitle, is called My Story. But before I read this, I just want to make mention that as a man of faith, I understand that as an African American, faith has always been a large part of who we are. I can recall at the age of 8 years old, my grandmother sitting me down at her kitchen table, pouring a glass of milk, taking out a jar of cookies, and reminding me that I have a purpose. In that, which surprised me, she also told me that I also had a call on my life, which at 8 years old scared the death out of me. My grandmother also informed me during that meeting, that time, she said that her great uncle was one of the founding bishops of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So I stand here in front of you as part of a lineage and a great privilege. Here it goes. My story. Hey, watch this, watch this. I shouted as I noticed two peculiar-looking young men walking in our direction. We had just finished football practice and we were standing outside of my junior high school. I was only 12 years old and trying to impress the ninth graders that stood nearby. Out of the corner of my eye, I discovered two young men overdressed for the type of weather we were having. What stood out most were the pocket protectors and the horn-rimmed glasses. These two were prime targets for my immature antics. These two were I had never seen these guys in my life, and they hadn't provoked any harassing. Nevertheless, they were going to be my catalyst into a realm of popularity that I could ride throughout my junior high school career. The only price to be paid was their innocence. This was one of those unparalleled moments every testosterone-charged male longs for, the opportunity to humiliate complete strangers in front of a group of people you're trying to impress as a match made in heaven. This was my moment, my day in the sun, my 15 minutes of fame, at the cost of someone else's self-esteem. I justify that I'd never seen them before and would probably never see them again. They would have a lifetime to get over my brutality and rudeness. Besides, this was just going to be a harmless prank by a few foolish teenagers. We would have a good laugh and one day forget about it. However, this turned out to be the day that I would never forget. Fortunately, the moment of truth didn't turn out the way I had anticipated. I wasn't aware that these fellows had noticed us before I had noticed them. I discovered they were not just passing by, but they were walking in our direction intentionally. Their dedication offended me, but I was impressed by their boldness. From the look in their eyes, I could tell an insult from a pubescent 12-year-old would hardly faze them. Though I wasn't going to allow their mission to obstruct my chance for acclaim, but before I could open my mouth, I was struck by a lightning bolt of truth. I heard the most profound question from the most bizarre lips. By one simple question, my life forever changed. As I contemplated evil for reasons unmerited, little did I know I was going to be schooled in a lesson on God's grace. That one simple question shook the foundation of my existence. It drastically shifted my paradigm and caused a crack of vulnerability in my pseudo-invincibility. As these young men gazed through me, as if to peer into my very heart, they asserted, "Do you know if you're going to heaven?" Humiliated and stunned by the veracity in which they asked, I readied myself for my insult. How dare they come to my school in front of my friends and embarrass me with such a vernacular? Now they did it. They were going to get it. I wasn't going to let them get off easy. But now as I hurried through my Rolodex of harassments, I swallowed, and with my muffled reply responded, no. Of all the things I could have said and thought of saying, my mouth only formed a simple two-letter word, no. They proceeded, the second question was even more profound than the first. With that simple certainty, they persisted, do you want to know for sure? Okay, now they've done it. Now no more Mr. Nice Guy. This was the second time in less than a minute these guys insulted me when I was there to insult them. My innermost being began to cry out. My stomach turned and sweat began to beat on my forehead. I didn't want to lose this golden moment. By this time, certainly, my comrades had discovered these guys were weird and deserved a bit of ridicule. And as I was just the man to oblige them, so as I pondered my response and postured myself for one of the most hilarious moments in junior high history, with rage and bitterness in my heart, which quickly rushed to my tongue, I opened my mouth and retorted, yes. Please tell me how I can be sure that I'm going to heaven. Instantly, I became frighteningly aware of my impotence. I suddenly remembered that going to church during my young life, I had come to believe that by being good, I could go to heaven. What I was now realizing, what was the most, at the most, my goodness wasn't comparable to God's goodness. I came to see that I was stained with sin and that there was nothing I could do about it. Disclosed before me was the indisputable truth that I needed a Savior. Thank you.
And before Bill returns to the podium, I want to say again, thank you for being with us today at this African American Read-In. Thank you for the stories. Thank you for the power of words. Thank you for mentioning that dialogue is what brings us forward. And let me mention too that this library is full of stories meant for you to take home with you, to share with your families, to continue what we're doing here today. So once again, let me say thank you for joining us.
We give special thanks to any and everyone that's helped make this read-in possible, but we especially like to acknowledge Lincoln City Libraries and acknowledge City TV 5 and Lincoln Public Schools for their support. And thanks again, and we'll see you next year for our Black History Month read-ins.